Hello, and welcome to my channel. As you can see today, again, we're talking about The Shining, and in particular, we're looking at the character of Mr. Grady, who we saw in that strange red bathroom scene with Jack Torrance. And we're going to really try to figure out what is really happening in that scene and what is really going on with the character of Grady. Now, the first time we hear about a man named Grady, who was the caretaker of the Overlook, it is in the scene where Jack has an interview with Mr. Ullman, and Mr. Ullman mentions that the man named Charles Grady had been the winter caretaker about 10 years ago in 1970, and he had lived here with his wife and two daughters, ages 8 and 10. You might think that this describes our twins, except twins are obviously the same age, not 2 years apart, so already it's a bit strange. Then we move on to that party scene where Jack gets a drink from Lloyd the bartender. It's really a party full of ghosts. All the guests are dressed like they are out of another era from many years ago, and here we meet someone named Grady. But he obviously looks like he's from the 1920s, not the 1970s. And he's not the winter caretaker. He's a waiter in the Gold Room party, as he, very politely, tries to clean up the mess of the spilled drinks that got on Jack.
Oh dear, I'm so sorry, sir. Oh dear, oh dear. I made an awful mess of your jacket, sir.
And when they get inside the famous red bathroom, Mr. Grady, again very politely, offers to clean Jack's jacket. He also says his name is Delbert Grady, not Charles Grady. But are they related? Is this the grandfather or long deceased relative of the Charles Grady that was here 10 years ago and had two daughters? Perhaps. But what's really interesting here is his voice. You can hear how polite and friendly he was in those previous clips, because this is going to completely change in a few minutes. Although this Grady might not be the winter caretaker, he does tell Jack that he had two daughters, so that's a big coincidence. Now we see Jack tell Grady that he saw his picture in a newspaper and that he knows about Grady killing his family. And we see the smile completely leave Grady's face. He seems different and says he has no memory of that. And then we see a complete change in Grady. His voice and demeanor are totally different. The smiling, polite waiter is gone. He seems cold and menacing now, a totally different personality, not the same guy we met a few minutes ago. Listen to his voice here.
I'm sorry to differ with you, sir. But you are the caretaker.
And oddly, although this Gold Room party looks like it's from the 1920s, Grady then alerts Jack to the fact that his son Danny is using his shining ability in real time to ask Mr. Halloran to come and help. Grady seems very interested in Danny's psychic abilities. Grady becomes even more menacing at the end of the scene, where he basically admits to killing his family because they didn't like the Overlook and tried to burn it down. It's like this place has always been cursed. And not long after this talk with Grady, we see Jack go in and sabotage the radio, which is how Wendy would have called for help. So I thought, we've got to find a way to describe the strange behavior of Mr. Grady, and by extension, Jack. Now, if you saw the thumbnail for this video, you know that it mentioned Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Of course, this is a character from a Gothic novel that came out in the late 1800s by author Robert Louis Stevenson, and it's about a Victorian doctor named Dr. Jekyll in London who drinks a potion that turns him into the murderous maniac Mr. Hyde. The strange substance he drinks causes a horrible transformation in Dr. Jekyll. He is no longer himself. He's unrecognizable, and this could almost describe Jack too after he gets drunk. But is it possible Mr. Grady is under the influence of some substance? He does work around alcohol, but he seemed perfectly friendly before Jack brought up his family in conversation. But maybe there is another theory that could describe some of the strange behavior of Mr. Grady and some of the strange events happening at the Overlook Hotel. And that is the theory of eternal return or eternal recurrence. It's a theory of time that states certain events will just continue to keep happening, basically forever. Remember what Grady said to Jack in the red bathroom? You've always been the caretaker, and I should know. I've always been here. That sounds very much like a character who is stuck in a time loop, who keeps experiencing the same or similar events over and over. Mr. Grady may be a character stuck in the eternal return universe, so to speak. Also, side note, the idea of eternal return was the subject of a book by the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche called Thus Spake Zarathustra, which was also the name of that famous theme song from 2001 A Space Odyssey. So I think that's pretty good proof that the idea of eternal return, of time and events repeating in an infinite loop, was obviously an idea that interested Kubrick. So, to start our sum up, we are looking at the character of Grady, who we meet in the Gold Room party and then the red bathroom with Jack. But how many Gradys are there? Because Mr. Ullman mentions one named Charles Grady, who went berserk and killed his family in 1970. But then we meet Delbert Grady here, who also apparently killed his family. So there seems to be more than one character named Grady who have killed their families, but in different eras, since the red bathroom Grady seems dressed from the 1920s, not the 1970s. Well, perhaps these two Gradys can be explained by the theory of eternal return, that theory of time that states the same events will continue to occur over and over, doomed to keep repeating itself forever. The Overlook Hotel is a place that seems haunted for the same reason. So although our two Gradys, the one mentioned by Mr. Ullman as Charles Grady, and the one we actually meet, who says his name is Delbert Grady, exist in different eras, they are apparently doomed to keep repeating this cycle they are in. The same events happen, just at different times. It's very eerie, but this theory seems plausible. Also, a good question to ask here is, now that Jack is frozen literally inside the hedge maze, is he also now stuck to keep repeating these events? Forever stuck at the Overlook. What did Grady tell him? You've always been the caretaker, and I should know because I've always been here. Well, that's my new video about the theory surrounding the character of Grady in The Shining. Hope you liked it. I'm definitely working on something new for next week, and I'll try and have that up soon. Also, it would help my channel if you did subscribe. But either way, my name is Shim. Thank you for spending time with me, and have a great day.